Hello, this is the Philosophical Rebellion Substack. Today I want to talk about my last paper, The COVID Conspiracy, because the conspiracy to cover up the origin of COVID-19 is one of the biggest scientific scandals in my lifetime. And there are a group of scientists who are pushing a false narrative of a proven natural origin while trying to downplay and stigmatize the lab leak hypothesis. Those deceptive scientists have greatly exaggerated the evidence supporting a natural origin of the virus, and many of them have either been dismissing or ignoring the evidence supporting a lab leak. That anti-science conspiracy to downplay the lab leak hypothesis and try to prevent investigations into any possible research-related origin of the pandemic is a truly insidious threat to all of our safety. Because if research had any role in creating the COVID-19 pandemic, then we need to make sure that future research of the same type is conducted in a way that would prevent pandemics from being sparked by that research. And by preventing investigations into that pathway, those deceptive scientists are leaving that pathway for future pandemics to occur wide open. So it is essential that we get to the bottom of how COVID-19 started. In 2022, we had the Lancet COVID Commission encouraging robust investigations into all three research-related pathways. And since then, we have the Wall Street Journal and Michael Schellenberger of Public Substack reporting the first three people from the Wuhan Institute of Virology to ever come down with COVID-19 after performing dangerous research in unsafe conditions. Multiple current and former United States government officials have come forward to multiple journalists and reported the names of the first three people to ever come down with COVID-19, based on classified information in the possession of the United States government. And based on those reports, we are one step away from total confirmation of a research-related origin of the pandemic, and that one step is forcing the intelligence community to obey the law. Because we do not need to rely on leaked reports to journalists of patient zero. The COVID Origins Act of 2023 demanded that the intelligence community release all information they have on how COVID-19 may have began. The law allowed the most limited of discretion possible when it came to redacting information, mandating that they could only redact information if it was necessary to protect sources and methods. But first, let me put that law into context, because in 2021, the United States State Department came out with a fact sheet which stated that they had information on multiple researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology coming down with COVID-19-like symptoms right before the pandemic began. That fact sheet from the United States State Department also said that the Chinese military had been collaborating with the WIV to conduct classified research, and that the WIV has a history of conducting gain-of-function research, but they have not been transparent about what research they have conducted. Then Congress held a congressional hearing with State Department official David Faith and the former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe. David Faith testified under oath that the information the United States has on those sick researchers is to this day the best indication we have in the entire origin investigation as to who or what was patient zero. Then John Ratcliffe testified that based on his informed assessment with a person with as much access to the classified information as anyone, that a research-related origin of COVID-19 is the only hypothesis which is supported by the evidence. And he advocated for that evidence to be made public in compliance with the COVID Origins Act of 2023. So the context for the COVID Origins Act of 2023 is that we know that the State Department has classified information on sick researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology right before the pandemic began. And in Section 3, Part C, numbers 1 through 7 of the COVID Origins Act, the law demanded that the Director of National Intelligence disclose the names, symptoms, date of symptom onset, role at the WIV, and possible exposure to coronavirus research for every sick researcher that they have information about. And I've scoured the report the Director of National Intelligence put out. She did not include it at all. Actually, the majority of the important information the law demanded to be disclosed was not included in the report submitted by the Director of National Intelligence. So the reason we are relying on journalists reporting leaks from multiple current and former government officials about patient zero is because the Director of National Intelligence is in violation of the law and was ordered to disclose that information but refused. And the COVID Origins Act of 2023 was passed unanimously by both chambers of Congress, then signed into law by Biden. So the entire elected government of the United States ordered the Director of National Intelligence to disclose that information, and the Director of National Intelligence disobeyed a direct order from the entirety of the elected American federal government. So in the lab leak investigation, evidence which could conclusively prove a lab leak origin of the pandemic beyond any reasonable doubt is being withheld illegally by the Director of National Intelligence. But there is an anti-science conspiracy trying to downplay that reality. Because if the pandemic started through a research-related incident, people with conflicts of interest would rather us not know. They would rather keep the world in the dark rather than admit that the dangerous research they have been doing has dangers like creating pandemics. So to this day, there are science journalists and scientists pushing the false narrative that the lab leak is not supported by one iota of evidence. At this point, that is not just a mere misstatement of facts. That is a downright lie. If any source claims that the lab leak origin is unlikely, but fails to include the context that evidence which could prove it conclusively is being withheld in violation of the COVID Origins Act, they are not an honest person, and you should not trust them. Because there is an extremely insidious force orchestrating an anti-science conspiracy in the origin of COVID-19 investigation, but they are not the people investigating the lab leak. They are the people trying to prevent that investigation. The reality is that we are one step away from total confirmation of a lab leak origin of COVID-19, and I've been advocating for this step for almost a year. We need a hearing in Congress with subpoenas for the Director of National Intelligence, plus heads of the FBI, Department of Energy, CIA, as well as the journalists who have reported on patient zero, based on leaks from multiple current and former government officials. And in public under oath, the intelligence community needs to be forced by Congress to obey the COVID Origins Act of 2023, and they need to be asked every single question of that law, and forced to answer it. Because not only is it an utterly disrespectful, shameful act for the intelligence community to disobey the elected government of the United States, it is a matter of extreme public importance in which ascertaining the truth of the situation could potentially help save millions of lives in the future through preventing pandemics, which might come about through the same research. So it is a total dereliction of duty for the intelligence community to withhold evidence which could help solve the problem. If their job is to protect the American citizens, then they are failing in that job right now by disobeying the law. So at this point in the origin investigation, a lab leak is significantly more likely, almost proven, and what it would take to prove it is forcing the intelligence community to obey the COVID Origins Act of 2023. I hope Congress rectifies the situation and forces compliance from the intelligence community.